and a half, other than just kind of side stuff. Work with a singer-songwriter by the name of Claudia Johnson. A lot of blues and rock, all original material. So.
Started. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Ripp. I'm the Outreach Coordinator and Undergraduate Advisor for the Latin American, Caribbean, and Iberian Studies program. And we welcome you to our lunchtime lecture today. Thanks so much for coming. You probably noticed when you came in there is coffee and water for hot tea and some light snacks. So please partake in that if you'd like. I also just wanted to mention a couple of things. If you're not on our listserv, we do have a kind of a sign-in sheet there where you can add your email address, and we'll put you on that. And we send out, a few emails a week as well as a weekly newsletter of all the upcoming events. There's a handout that shows the remaining lunchtime lectures we have this spring. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that we have a special event coming up this Saturday, and I did put copies of a handout over there about it. But we will be, yep, there you go, thank you. We'll be screening a Uruguayan film on Saturday evening at 4:30 at the Marquis Theater at Union South. After the film, there will be a Skype Q&A with the film's director from Uruguay, and then that will be followed by a public reception. All of these events are free and open to the public. The reception will have snacks and drinks, and the Deputy Consul of Uruguay will be in attendance at the film screening and the reception. So we'd love if you came to that. So thanks for coming today. And I'll turn it over to Francisco Scarano, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Just a very short introduction. Thank you for coming. I know that April is a very difficult month in which to find space in our calendars. We are delighted that the university works the way it does, and appointments can be of all types, including honorary fellowships in departments or programs. And today we have the fruits of one such honorary fellowship in the Department of Anthropology. His name is Jack Forbes, Jack W. Forbes. And Jack is a PhD candidate in ethnomusicology at the University of Florida, Gainesville. He has moved to Madison thanks to the fact that his wife has taken up a position in teaching in the bilingual immersion school in Leopold. And we've been the beneficiaries of that move. Jack is going to be speaking about the history of marimba orchestras in Guatemala from the 1920s to the present. Why the 1920s? Because apparently that's when jazz made its entry into Guatemala, and it's an interesting thing to conceive of, that the marimba and jazz actually go together in their initial moment. So without further ado, I will introduce Jack Forbes, who will speak to us para todos los chapines, music, popular culture, and identity in the Guatemalan Marimba Orquestra sequence.
Thank you very much. Yes, and thank you, Francisco, and thank you, Sarah. I was just about to ask about the lights. Yeah. In my mind.
Is that too dark maybe?
It's probably better to ask you folks. Is that all right?
That's better.
Yeah, there's some video and stuff, so as long as you can see it. I also wanted to thank Jerome Kamal and Maria Lepowski in anthropology before I got started here today. As Francisco mentioned, having the honorary fellowship has just been wonderful. Having access to the university, the libraries and everything like that has been fantastic this past year. To get us started here, I wanted to play you a brief video of a band that I've done most of my research with, Los Internacionales Conejos. And that's where the first part of my title comes from, para todos los chapines. You're going to see in the very beginning of the video one of their vocalists, a gentleman by the name of David Miranda, greeting the audience. He's been with the group for about 15 years now, and kind of functions as their front man, although they don't use that term exactly. He does most of the coaxing of the audience and getting people into the show and everything like that, as you will see. But he uses phrases like this all the time in their live shows. Para todos los chapines, for all the Guatemalans. música para todos los gustos, todas las edades, music for all tastes, for all ages. And that's really what this particular band, Internacionales Conejos, strive for every night. And so with that, let's hear some music so you know exactly what you're getting into here. This is from their 130th anniversary show. As I'll discuss later, this band's been around since the 1880s in various forms. But this was, I think, back in March, maybe February, in the Parque de la Industria in Zone 9 of Guatemala City.
Internacionales Conejos. Buenas noches. ¿Cómo está mi gente de Guatemala? Esta noche vinieron a bailar. Vamos esto. Internacionales Conejos.
Que no hay sentimiento, que a la leña le hace falta fuego de una duda, te provoca el deseo que la luna tiene un nuevo dueño. No hagas caso, quítate de medio, ya la loca, sácala de sueño, esa duda sirva de pretexto, ponle ritmo y movimiento al cuerpo. Sálvame el amor, que siento por dentro. De juro no miento, solo cambia de tiempo. Solo cambia de color.
Gentleman at the very end there who you saw dancing and also turning around to direct the band. That's Werner Orozco, the musical director of Los Internacionales Conejos. So there you have it, Marimba Orquesta in all its glory. All the lights, all the pyrotechnics, all the wonderful silk suits, the smoke machines, everything. The groups themselves are essentially large dance ensembles that combine the marimba, which is Guatemala's national symbol and also national instrument, with recent and past popular hits. That could be top 40 Mexican regional dance music, pan-Caribbean hits, and international pop hits. With, as I mentioned at the outset, with this kind of goal of providing entertainment to all. Now, the term Marimba Orquesta itself, and this is another shot of the Conejos, it's very hard to get pictures of these types of bands. There's about 20 musicians on stage, and in fact, I'm probably standing on a speaker holding on to some light pole or something like that while I took this. But the bands themselves and the term itself refers to a number of different things. So the actual ensemble, the group of musicians, but also it's a way of referring to a type of dance genre. If someone's asking you, for instance, what kind of music do you get into, or what kind of music do you like to dance to, they'll ask you, ¿Bailas Marimba Orquesta? Like, do you dance to Marimba Orquesta? Leaving out the fact that within Marimba Orquesta, there's any number of different musical genres that we'll be going through here today, whether it's bachata, reggaeton, waltzes, rock, cumbia, whatever, you name it. So beyond the ensemble itself and as a dance style or a dance genre, the term also refers to this just amazing spectacle that you just saw. There's often amongst the top 3 marimbas orquestas in Guatemala, Internacionales Conejos and 2 other groups, sort of what I often refer to as a kind of a sound war, in the idea that each group is always trying to outdo the other, buying the very most brand new LED lights, the biggest smoke machines, the craziest pyrotechnic setups, and they're always trying to kind of compete with each other, and it's led to just these enormous setups, as what you just saw in their 130th anniversary show. And when one of these groups arrive to say, that's in Guatemala City, as this show is as well, but when one of these small groups, and I've seen this many times, arrives to a small rural town in Guatemala City, it's usually the biggest day of the year for that particular town. It's usually the culmination of their feria, their yearly feria. Or if they're celebrating perhaps the new installation of a water project or some sort of infrastructure within the town, they bring in the conejos because it's going to be a serious celebration. Many times I've been on the bus with them, and there's children just waiting on the outside, on the outskirts of the town to run along with the bus. And the conejos equipment van, which has this cartoon rabbit holding 2 sets of marimba mallets in each hand, they always know that that's the conejos, and it's always fun to kind of see the kids running along with the band as they enter the towns. And the performances of Marimba's orquestas are these incredible sites in terms of my research, where we have a contestation and maintenance of just a host of different notions, whether that's popular culture, patriotism, authenticity, modernity, nostalgia, and ultimately the formation and representation of various different identities within Guatemala, whether that's nationality, ethnicity, generational identity, religion, socioeconomic status. And when I first began studying these groups, I was coming out of as a percussionist, conservatory trained percussionist. I had no idea that this particular branch of marimba would exist. And the Marimba Orquesta, as I will show you here in a little bit, is kind of a very different direction from how marimba is often viewed, and also how it's often portrayed through Guatemalan tourism boards and through the state apparatus as well. So today, or in this remaining time I have here, we're going to get into a little bit of the context of the marimba, explaining what sort of symbolism the marimba carries in terms of nationalism, but also how these groups have been able to sort of meet at the nexus between popular culture and nationalism. Being that the marimba has a very large background in terms of what it is to represent Guatemalan identity, a lot of marimbas orquestas have been sort of looked down upon by members of the press, by academia, and therefore you don't really find marimba orquesta in Guatemalan musical history. And I'm hoping to change that. So I'm going to be giving you a couple different examples, I should say several different examples of music from these groups, but focusing on 2 specific ensembles. These gentlemen right here, Internacionales Conejos, and then another group called Marimba Orquesta Gallito. I guess lastly, I should say that all this research, most of it has been conducted between 2007 and 2010. I've been working down in Guatemala since 2001. But it wasn't until about 2007, 2008 that I really made the switch from traditional marimba styles into this popular style. I was lucky enough to have some assistance from some historians from the Universidad de San Carlos in Guatemala City that helped me get into the national newspaper archives. And as you'll see in our sort of historical trajectory today, marimba's orquestas are actually kind of deeply embedded within these notions of popular culture and nationalism as well in Guatemala. So, for some contextual background, the marimba in Guatemala has 3 different physical types. The type that you see here is what's referred to as the marimba doble. Depending on who you ask, whether they're Guatemalan or Mexican, you're going to get very different answers as to where this particular type of marimba comes from. But this particular instrument, at least in Guatemala, is viewed to come about right around the end of the 19th century. Before that, you can imagine a piano with just the white keys. Most marimbas were set up like that. That was the marimba sencilla. And even before that, some of the earliest prototypes that are still found a little bit, in fact, you might have seen one in Chichicastenango, there's another type of marimba called the marimba de tecomates, and that's the closest type of marimba that is at least known of in Guatemala that is far as we can tell, was brought over, at least in the minds of African slaves during the transatlantic slave trade. But here we have the standard marimba doble setup, a larger marimba called the marimba grande, a smaller one called the marimba tenor. Typically how it's set up, and I kind of designed this talk for a much more general audience, not to get too technical into the musical aspects of it, but normally what you'll have, it's almost kind of like a chorus in the sense that different positions play. There'll be somebody on the bass. This person here is normally playing just straight up chords of the harmony, and then the other 5 members of the marimba are playing different melodies and counter melodies. And so in this particular setup, what you're going to get is perhaps a main melody in 2 different octaves, that same main melody doubled an octave lower, and then your counter melodies here on the segunda tiple and segunda piccolo. But just to have you have a kind of a general idea of how the marimba doble typically works. Now, when we talk about Guatemalan marimba, I often refer to it as kind of a marimba complex because it's sort of like saying samba or jazz or rock and roll, and that you're going to find a very large number of sort of subgenres, subsets of that particular style. Now, when we talk about marimba in marimba guatemalteca, there's essentially 5 kind of sub-genres within that. I'm only going to play examples of a few of them. But we have Marimba Orquesta, which is often sort of set against a style called marimba pura, pure marimba. And we have folkloric marimba, marimba de concierto, and marimba de la iglesia, which I won't go into today for time reasons. But as I mentioned before, the earlier type of marimba, the marimba sencilla, or just the white keys on the piano, that's typically what you would find in the marimba folklorica style, typically dealing with what is known as the son guatemalteco, a specific folk style within Guatemala. I'm sure some of you know that the word son is common throughout Latin America, but at least in Guatemala, it deals specifically with this type of feel that you're about to hear. This is a group from Rabinal, in the eastern part of Guatemala. The main characteristic of this type of style is the sesqui altera, the interplay of 2s and 3s. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And of course, you can have it there. There's your marimba sencilla. No black key, as it were. Now the marimba pura, so now we're talking about after the invention of the marimba doble, kind of the first 2 or 3 decades of the 20th century, after the marimba had been altered so we could bring in different European genres like waltzes and foxtrots and polkas and things like that, you get this style of marimba. It only became marimba pura later on, sort of in reaction to marimba orquesta. But here's this. And the example I'm playing you right here, this is a waltz by the name of Noche de Luna entre las Ruinas, from one of the very first marimba composers, marimba doble composers in Guatemala, Mariano Valverde. And lastly, kind of round out our background here. Marimba de concierto.